I'm Richard Nash. I'm the founder and CEO of Cursor, and I'm also the publisher of Red Lemonade, which is the first publisher that Cursor is powering. So, what I've created in Cursor is basically a platform that allows a publisher to also be a membership organization. So all the fans, the aspiring writers, the established writers who identify with the kind of aesthetic and mission of the press can all become members. They can all upload their work, comment on one another's work, and that includes those established writers. The 4 books that we're publishing this year, the full text of them is up on the site and can be commented on by anyone. And we are now using that community as our sole source of books to publish. And so the 4th book, a book by a guy named Matthew Battles, who had done a nonfiction book earlier in the decade in 2002 with Norton. This is a story collection. And he posted 4 of his stories and started getting all kinds of buzz on the site. So I got in touch with him and said, can you upload some more? These are really cool. And he uploaded about, 7 more and kept getting great buzz. So I said, we'll offer you a contract. I was a theatre director for a decade before I got into publishing. And I'm actually from Ireland. So I also have another little bit of outsider relationship to American culture and society. And I think that helped enormously. I came in to the publisher that I ran before this, Softskull Press, knowing nothing about publishing. I didn't know what a galley was. I didn't know how one acquired books to publish. And so I had to learn on the fly, and I had to learn super instrumentally. I had to figure out what is my exact problem right now and how do I solve it today? And what is my problem tomorrow and how do I solve it that day? And so I wasn't learning I wasn't in an editorial silo learning how to traffic manuscripts within the HarperCollins system. I was in a publisher that was about to go out of business, that had no books in the pipeline, and I just had to solve problems every day. And as far as I could tell, what my job was connect writers and readers. We had to get books, and then we had to find readers to buy those books. And that was what I did. And so that turned out, this was not a conscious act on my part, but that sort of turned out to be enormously helpful as the years went by, because I didn't learn a system. I was just solving problems every day. And that's sort of been my mentality all the way through. And so I feel really blessed in that regard. The traditional relationship between a publisher and an established writer can sometimes veer dangerously close to a zero-sum game. The agent tries to get as much of an advance out of the publisher as they can, which, especially in the case of an independent publisher, means they're extracting working capital out of the publisher. My wife happens to be an intellectual property lawyer, and she used to do a lot of transactions in the fashion licenses, in the fashion and cosmetics business. And in there, the upfront money, it's a part of what goes on, but it's not the biggest part. And they also have like these 3-year licenses, 4-year licenses, 2-year licenses that go on, with Michael Kors and a handbag manufacturer to make Michael Kors handbags, right? So it's sort of like, well, why do we have these life of the copyright contracts over intellectual property that's worth, $5,000 to $10,000 over its lifetime, and projects that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars of these 2 or 3-year licenses? It's crazy. So what I realized is that, I never really lost very many writers when I was running Softskull, because they kind of knew for their work, I knew how to sell it better than anyone else anyway. So why did I need to lock them into a contract that lasted for their life plus 70 years on top of it? If I did a good job, they'll renew the contract after 3 years. If I do a shitty job, why would either of us want to still be stuck to one another? So I sort of felt like we needed to base our relationship on the mutual rewards that we were providing one another, rather than on the coercive power that a life of the copyright contract gives a publisher. You know, in terms of how the larger corporate publishers who have a massive legacy business, legacy cost structure, in terms of how they can adjust in an environment with, you know, I mean, my goal is to have Cursor power the world's next 50,000 independent publishers. So how do you deal with 50,000 independent publishers nipping at their heels? You know, it's a real challenge. An advisor friend of mine, Brian O'Leary, who actually went to proper business school, talks about Clayton Christensen, who wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, about precisely this particular problem. And one of the things he said is, well, you have to create other units and allow them to experiment. So the big publishers have to create other units and allow them to experiment, and they're starting to do that. The thing that I don't think they're doing yet, though, is that unit has to be allowed to destroy the parent. That unit's mandate has to be Oedipal, kill your father. And that's what I've not seen out of these units. What I've seen out of these units is, okay, there's a community play here, let's build a company that can do this community play. Or there's a social reading play out here, let's do something that can do a social reading play. And those businesses actually have to operate as if their mandate is to put a dagger through the heart of the institution that founded them. And that's not something that I'm seeing an appetite for right now. That's sort of what needs to happen. The only other thing that I could see playing out is John Karp at Simon & Schuster said that he wanted to take his model at 12 of a kind of like editor, one or two editors, one or two publicists, a marketing expert, you know, have a real distinct unit with a fair amount of autonomy that in theory would use every other element of the infrastructure that the host organism has, whether it's the FedEx account or the Salesforce. And he wants to try and implement that across the board within Simon & Schuster. So if he really gets his way, then I could see that as a functional model, because what it's done is it's separated the bits that don't scale, editorial, one-to-one relationships with authors, domain intelligence about media and influencers and things like that, and separates it from the stuff that scales. Because the stuff that scales, some of it will not scale 2 years from now, as you're already starting to see with people cutting away warehouse infrastructure and handing it over to Ingram. And the bits of infrastructure that no longer are relevant to the business get cut away, and the bits of infrastructure that could new infrastructure that could support those little editorial units would come in. I wouldn't want to have John's responsibility in that regard. So I could see that model allowing large-scale enterprises to flourish, but otherwise the only way I can see them operating is by them funding the business that then kills them. So yeah, a lot of publishers get very anxious about the notion of putting the entire text of a novel up on the website for free, either because they think it'll be pirated or because they think, well, if it's up there for free, nobody's going to buy it. Our philosophy is that the big obstacle to getting people to buy books is not the price of the book, but the fear of the amount of time they'll waste reading it before they realize it's not for them. That is the great obstacle. Once somebody knows they're going to have a spectacular 15-hour reading experience, they'll pay $50, they'll pay $100. Not all of them, but depending on their disposable income and how fabulous a reading experience it is. So I don't see a book for free on a website as being in competition with a $15 paperback or a $50 limited edition. I see it as the gateway drug. So people buy books to become part of something, to engage with their culture, to gift. It's a sort of a transactional, emotional, experiential thing. You know, yeah, you could get a t-shirt at Walmart for $2.99, but if you can get the band's t-shirt for $29.95 at the concert, you will happily pay $29.95 for what's allegedly the same thing. Because in the end, it's not the same thing. It is a different experience. And so we're so oftentimes, what we're really about is not selling books, but productizing the writer-reader relationship. Books are by their nature very idiosyncratic. And most books sell fewer than 2,000 copies. And so the way they are going to get discovered is by communities that operate on that scale. So the filtering process, the discovery process that is going to go on in publishing is going to be quite tribal. So I see the small niche community as being the natural state of publishing. So I think the world can have 150,000 independent publishers. So I see two massive demographic shifts happening in the world: the explosion of the developing world middle class and the aging of the Western world's middle class, providing vast amounts of times to create and consume stories. And we are going to need hundreds of thousands of clusters of writing and reading professionals and gifted amateurs to help sort and assimilate and matchmake all that work, and I just want to help them do that.